fringes of the Andromeda Coalition's territory, inside Commander John Reynolds. Gripped the safety harness tighter, his knuckles turning white. The mission was supposed to be simple: deliver medical supplies to the outpost, grab a drink at the local watering hole, and get the hell back to the Terran flagship. Atmospheric disturbances, John muttered, running a hand through his light blonde hair, his light blue eyes narrowed as he checked the navigation panel. Computer status report warnings. Gravitational anomaly, detected course deviation, imminent, brace for impact. John barely had time to tighten his harness before the pod lurched sideways, spinning wildly through the alien sky. His nanotech suit, a sleek black material that hugged his Muse frame automatically, stiffened around vital areas, preparing for impact. The last thing he saw before blacking out was the rapidly approaching tree line of an uncharted forest. When consciousness returned, John found himself lying on a soft bed of moss, surrounded by towering trees with luminescent bark. His head throbbed, and a quick self-assessment confirmed 2 cracked ribs and a dislocated shoulder. The nanotech suit had already administered pain suppressant and was working to stabilize his injuries. Well, this is a fine mess, he groaned, attempting to sit up. I wouldn't move if I were you, human, came a melodic voice from behind him. Jay's military training kicked in instantly. He rolled to his side, ignoring the sharp pain in his ribs, and reached for his sidearm, only to find it missing. Standing a few feet away was a humanoid figure that took his breath away. Her skin was a shimmering blue that seemed to catch and reflect the ambient light of the forest. Long, pale white hair was intricately braided into several thin strands that framed her face, accentuating glowing light blue eyes that regarded him with curiosity. She wore a brown wrap-style top that left her midriff exposed, with a belt on her hips from which hung 2 short fabric strips in the front and back. Leather armbands adorned her shoulders and wrists, and a simple necklace circled her slender neck. Looking for this, she held up his pulse pistol, examining it with casual interest. Primitive, but effective. I imagine. John slowly raised his hands in a universal gesture of surrender. I'm Commander John Reynolds of the Tan Alliance. My ship crashed, and I mean no harm to you or your people. The alien woman's lips curved into what might have been a smile. I am Nyla, guardian of the Valen tribe, and you, Commander John Reynolds, are trespassing on sacred ground. Sacred ground? Look, I didn't exactly plan this detour, John replied, wincing as he finally managed to sit upright. If you could point me toward the nearest comms relay, I'll be out of your hair. Or a braids. Neela's expression remind him passive, but something like amusement flickered in her glowing eyes. The nearest relay is beyond the Crimson Mountains, a journey of many cycles, and you are in no condition to travel. She approached him cautiously, kneeling beside him to examine his injuries. Her proximity sent an unexpected shiver down John's spine, we from apprehension or something else he couldn't tell. Besid. She continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper. The elders will want to meet you. It's not every day a human falls from the sky into our territory. The elders? John asked, trying to ignore how her fingers lightly traced the edge of his nanotech suit, where it had torn at the shoulder. Our leaders. They will decide your fate. Nyla stood abruptly, gesturing for him to follow. Can you walk, human? John gritted his teeth and pushed himself to his feet, swaying slightly before finding his balance. Lead the way. As they treed through the bioluminescent forest, Johan studied his captor or guide, he wasn't sure which yet. She moved with a fluid grace that suggested both strength and agility, occasionally glancing back to ensure he was keeping pace. So Nyla, he ventured, breaking the silence, what exactly does a guardian do in your tribe? She veed effortlessly over a fallen log, then waited for him to catch up. I protect our borders from threats, guide lost travelers, and occasionally she paused, those luminous eyes fixing on him, and collect interesting specimens that fall from the sky. Specimen he prefer a distinguished guest, John quipped, earning what was definitely a smirk this time. Distinguished guests don't usually arrive in smoking metal pods that destroy sacred trees. She countered. John winced. Fair point. Send me the bill for damages. To his surprise, Nyla laughed, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. You're unusual for a human. Most would be begging for mercy or threatening retribution. By now, I'm not most human, John replied with a confident grin. that masked his growing concern about his situation. Besides, my mother taught me to be polite when meeting new people, especially those holding my weapons. Their banter continued as they approached a clearing where structures made of living trees and crystalline formations house what appeared to be a thriving community. Humanoid figures with varying shades of blue skin moved about, some stopping to stare at the newcomer with undisguised curiosity or suspicion. "Welcome to Veenthar, human," Nyla announced, gesturing to the settlement, "your temporary home, unless the elders decide otherwise." John took in the alien beauty of the place, the integration of technology and nature, unlike anything in Terran colonies. "It's impressive. It's home," Nyla replied simply, then added with a mischievous glint, "Now let's find you somewhere to rest before you collapse and embarrass us both," as she led him toward one of the smaller structures. John couldn't shake the feeling that his unplanned visit to Elysium 9 was about to become far more complicated than a simple crash landing. The dwelling Nyla led John to was surprisingly comfortable. A single room with walls of living wood that seemed to breathe with the forest around it. Bioluminescent fungi provided soft lighting, and a bed of woven fibers and moss looked more inviting than it had any right to. "The healer will attend to you soon," Nyla said, leaning against the door frame. "Try not to bleed on the ceremonial rugs." John glanced down at the intricate patterns beneath his feet. "I'll do my best to keep my bodily fluids to myself." Appreciated. Nyla's lips quirked upward. "The elders will see you at dawn. Until then, you're my responsibility." "Lucky me," John replied, carefully lowering himself onto a bench carved from a single piece of wood. "So what's the protocol? Here am I, a prisoner, a guest, or something in between?" NLA considered this, her head tilting slightly. "Let's call you an unexpected visitor, one who requires supervision, and you drew the short straw, actually," she said, finally entering the room fully and closing the door behind her. "I volunteered this," caught JN by surprise. "Why would you do that?" Nyla approached, studying him with those unnervingly bright eyes. "Humans rarely venture to our quadrant. Those that do usually bring trouble or seek to exploit our resources. I wanted to understand what kind of human you are and what's your assessment so far." John asked, suddenly aware of how close she was standing. "Undetermined," she replied, reaching out to touch the torn fabric of his nanotech suit. "This material, it responds to your body's needs." John nodded, trying to ignore the tingling sensation where her fingers brushed against his exposed skin. "Tan military-grade nanotech. It regulates temperature, administers medical aid, and provides limited protection against environmental hazards and weapons fire." "Impressive," Nyla murmured, "yet it failed to prevent your injuries. It's designed for combat situations, not crash landings," John explained, wincing as he shifted positions. "Speaking of which, any chance of retrieving my pod? The emergency beacon might still be functional." Nyla's expression hardened slightly. "Your vessel landed in the heart of Valen, our most sacred site. It will remain untouched until the elders determine how to properly cleanse the area." "Great," John muttered. "So I'm stuck here indefinitely. Is our company so terrible?" Nyla asked, that hint of amusement returning to her voice before Jay could respond. The door opened to admit an elderly blue-skinned male with elaborate facial markings and robes that seemed to shimmer with their own inner light. "Healer Torin." Nyla greeted him with a respectful bow. The old man nodded to her before turning his attention to John. "So this is the Skyfallen human. Interesting specimen." Again with the specimen talk, John sighed. "Commander John Reynolds, Terran Alliance." "Pleasure to meet you, Sir." Torin's bushy eyebrows rose in surprise at the formal address. "At least it has manners. Remove your protective skin and human. I must assess your damages." JN hesitated, glancing at Nyla. "I can leave if modesty is a concern," she offered, though her tone suggested she found the concept amusing. "It's not that," John replied. "The suit is currently stabilizing my injuries. Removing it might not be the best idea." Tan made a dismissive sound. "Your primitive technology can't compare to our healing arts. Remove it, or I will leave you to your pain." With a resigned sigh, John activated the release mechanism at his neck. The nanotech material retracted, revealing his muscular torso marred by bruising and the obvious deformity of his dislocated shoulder. Nyla's eyes widened slightly, though whether from the extent of his injuries or something else, John? Couldn't tell. Torin approached, his gnarled hands hovering over John's injuries without touching them. A soft humming emanated from the old healer. Into John's astonishment, a warm sensation spread through his body, followed by the distinct feeling of tissues knitting together and bones realigning. Holy, John breathed as his shoulder popped back into place without pain. That's incredible, primitive indeed, Torin muttered, though there was a hint of pride in his voice. The ribs will take longer to fully heal. No strenuous activity for 3 cycles defined strenuous, John said. Experiment L. Rotating his newly repaired shoulder, Torin shot him a knowing look. I believe the meaning is universal, Commander. With that cryptic comment, he nodded to Nyla and departed as silently as he had arrived. Well, he's a ray of sunshine, John commented once they were alone again. Neela laughed softly. Torin is the oldest and wisest of our healers. His bedside manner may be lacking, but his skills are unmatched. John had to admit his pain had diminished significantly. He allowed his nanotech suit to reform around his body, the material flowing like liquid before solidifying into its usual form-fitting shape. Fascinating, Nyla murmured, watching the process. Your technology almost seems alive. In a way it is, John explained. The nanites respond to electrical impulses from my nervous system. They learn and adapt to my needs over time. Nyla stepped closer, her curiosity evident, like a symbiotic relationship, something like that. Yeah, John found himself enjoying her interest. It was refreshing after years of military stoicism and protocol. As evening fell, Nyla brought food, strange fruits, and what appeared to be some kind of roasted game meat. They ate together, exchanging questions about their respective cultures. John learned that the Valen were one of several tribes on Elysium 9, all descendants of a space-faring civilization that had chosen to return to a simpler way of life centuries ago, while maintaining certain advanced technologies, so you could leave this planet if you wanted to, John asked, finishing the last of the surprisingly delicious meal. Nyla nodded. We have ships capable of interstellar travel, but why would we leave? Elysium 9 provides everything we need: curiosity, exploration, meeting new civilizations. John suggested we tried that. Nyla replied, her tone suddenly serious. It nearly destroyed us. The returning was a choice to preserve what matters most, our connection to each other and to our world. John considered. This I can respect that, though I have to admit, I go crazy staying in one place forever. Perhaps that's the difference between humans and vain, Nyla said, gathering the empty dishes. You always look to the horizon, wondering what lies beyond. We look inward, seeking deeper understanding of what already surrounds us. As she turned to leave, John called after her, will you be back? Neela paused at the doorway, those luminous eyes regarding him with an unreadable expression. I told you, Commander, you're my responsibility until the elders decide your fate. I'll return at dawn to escort you to the council. After she left, John explored his temporary quarters, searching for weaknesses or potential escape routes out of habit rather than immediate need. Finding none, he eventually settled onto the surprisingly comfortable bed, staring up at the ceiling where tiny points of bioluminescence mimicked a star sky. His last thought before drifting off to sleep was that of all the planets to crash land on, he could have done a lot worse than one with advanced healing technology and a beautiful blue-skinned guardian with eyes that seemed to see right through him. John awoke to soft humming and the sensation of being watched. Opening his eyes, he found Nyla perched on a stool near his bed, weaving something intricate with her slender blue fingers. Creepy much, he muttered, sitting up and running a hand through his disheveled blonde hair. Neela didn't look up from her weaving. Your sleeping patterns are inefficient. You twitch and make noises. It's called dreaming, John replied, stretching carefully to test his healing ribs. The pain had diminished to a dull ache. Don't tell me the Vaughn don't dream. We experience communal visions during our rest cycle, she explained, finally meeting his gaze. Dreaming is considered primitive. JN snorted. Well, excuse my underdeveloped brain functions. You are excused, Nella replied, with what he was beginning to recognize as her version of deadpan humor. She set aside her weaving, some kind of ceremonial ban from the looks of it, and stood. The elders await. Are you prepared to face judgment? Do I have a choice? John asked, activating his nanotech suit's cleaning Protocol the material rippled, shedding the dirt and sweat of the previous day. There is always choice, Commander Nyla said, watching the process with fascination, though some choices lead to less desirable outcomes than others. In that case, I'm as ready as I'll ever be. John squared his shoulders, wincing slightly at the lingering tenderness. Lead the way, Guardian. The morning air was crisp and sweet as they exited the dwelling. Vailnar was alive with activity, children, with varying shades of blue skin, playing among the trees, adults engaging crafts or tending to what appeared to be living technology that grew from the forest floor. Several Vane stopped to stare at John as he passed, some with open curiosity, others with thinly veiled hostility. One small child, braver than the rest, darted forward to touch John's leg before being hurriedly pulled away by an apologetic parent. You're quite the attraction, Neela observed as they walked. Most of our younger generation has never seen a human before. I'm feeling a bit like a zoo exhibit, John admitted, though I suppose that's fair. I'd be just as curious. In their position, they approached a massive tree at the center of the village, its trunk wider than 10 men, standing shoulder to shoulder. Intricate patterns were carved into its bark and platforms spiraled around it, connected by bridges of living wood. The great tree, Nyla explained, nodding. Jonk Al, the heart of Valent Thar, and home to our elders. It's said to be as old as our presence on Elysium 9. It's magnificent, John said sincerely. Nala led him up a spiraling ramp that wound around the trunk. As they ascended, John noticed the air becoming thicker, with a sweet, almost intoxicating scent. Now what's that smell, he asked, feeling slightly lightheaded. The tree pollen, Nyla replied. It enhances perception and promotes truthfulness. The elders believe it helps reveal one's true nature during council meetings. Wait, John halted. Are you saying I'm about to be drugged for my hearing? NLA turned to face him, her expression serious. The pollen doesn't force you to speak truth. It merely makes deception uncomfortable. If your intentions are honorable, you have nothing to fear. John weighed his options. He could refuse and likely be considered hostile, or proceed and trust that his diplomatic training would help him navigate whatever psychoactive effects the pollen might have. Fine, he finally said. But if I start confessing my deepest secrets or singing Terran folk songs, I'm blaming you. Nyla's lips curved into that now familiar, almost smile. Bear that burden, Commander. They continued upward until they reached a large platform near the crown of the tree. A semicircle of 7 elderly violin sat on living chairs that seemed to have grown from the platform itself. Their skin ranged from deep midnight blue to pale aquamarine, and their white hair was elaborately braided with beads and small crystals that caught the morning light. In the center sat a male Vane with skin the color of a stormy ocean and eyes that seemed to contain galaxies. His presence commanded attention without effort. High Elder Morin, Nyla announced, bowing deeply. I present Commander John Reynolds of the Terran Alliance, who fell from the sky into the heart of Valon. John stepped forward and offered a respectful bow of his own. Thank you for granting me this audience, Honorable Elders. High Alier Morin studied John with those unsettling eyes when he spoke. His voice was surprisingly deep and resonant. Commander Reynolds, your arrival has disturbed the harmony of our sacred grounds and raised questions among our people. Why have you come to Elysium 9? The pollen's effect was subtle, but noticeable. JN felt a strange compulsion to elaborate beyond what was strictly necessary, but he maintained his focus. My arrival was unintentional. High Elder I was on a routine supply mission when my transport encountered a gravitational anomaly that forced me off course. The crash landing was unexpected, and Elder Terrans, right, a female with pale blue skin and sharp features, leaned forward. The humans have long known that Elysium 9 is protected territory under the Andromeda Accords. Why would a military vessel approach our world at all? With respect, Elder JN replied. Mission path was well outside your system's boundaries. The anomaly pulled me in from several light years away, something I have never experienced before in all my years of space travel. Murmurs rippled through that the council at this. Morin raised a hand for silence. What you describe is concerning, Commander. Such gravitational disturbances are not natural to this region of space, Morin said, his brow furrowing. Elder Kira, your thoughts? The sharp-featured female elder who had questioned John earlier nodded it aligns with the anomalies our sensors have. Detected in recent cycles, the disturbances have been growing stronger. John's military instincts sharpened. You've been monitoring these anomalies. Do you have any data on their source or pattern? Why would we share such information with you? Human challenged another elder, a male with deep cobalt skin and a skeptical expression. Your kind has a history of weaponizing knowledge. JN felt the pollen's influence urging him toward candor, because if these anomalies are spreading, they could threaten both our peoples. The Tan Alliance has resources and expertise that might help identify the cause. Nyla, who had remained silent beside him, spoke. Up high elder, I have observed the human since his arrival. While I cannot vouch for his entire species, this one has shown respect for our ways and genuine concern for the damage his vessel caused. Morin considered this, those galaxy-filled eyes never leaving John's face. Commander Reynolds, what are your intentions now that you find yourself among us? The pollen seemed to intensify around JN, making his head swim slightly. He took a deep breath before answering honestly. My first priority is to contact my people so they don't assume I'm dead, and send a search party that might further disturb your territory. Beyond that, I'd like to understand these anomalies and, if possible, help address them. And he hesitated, the pollen pushing him toward a truth he hadn't fully acknowledged. I'm curious about your people. The Valen are unlike any species I've encountered in my travels. This last admission seemed to satisfy Morn, who exchanged glances with the other elders. After a moment of silent communication, he spoke. We will permit you to remain in Vailnar. While we consider these matters, you may send a single communication to your people, under supervision, informing them of your survival, but not your location. Guardian Nilo will continue as your host and ensure you respect our boundaries. John bowed again. Thank you, High Elder. Your generosity honors me. As the formal audience concluded, Morin gestured for John to approach him privately. Nayla stepped back respectfully, but remained within earshot. Commander Moore said quietly, there is wisdom in your words about cooperation, but not all among us share this view. Tread carefully during your stay. The balance between tradition and progress is delicate among the Evelyn. I understand, John replied, sensing the political undercurrents. I have no wish to disrupt your society. Morin's expression softened slightly. Perhaps some disruption is inevitable when different worlds meet. The question is whether it leads to growth or destruction. He glanced at Nyla. Guardian, ensure our guest has access to the communications array at sundown. With that, the audience was over as they descended the spiral path. John felt the P effects gradually diminishing, leaving his mind clear. That went better than expected. He commented to Nyla, I thought for sure I'd be sentenced to some kind of ritual punishment for crashing into your sacred site. Nyla gave him a sidelong glance. The day is young. Commander, don't rule out ritual punishment, just. Yet John couldn't tell if she was joking. So what now? I'm essentially on alien house arrest until sundown. Not exactly, Nayla replied. As your host, I'm responsible for integrating you into daily life. While you're here, that means you'll assist me with my duties, which are today perimeter patrol. We need to check the boundary markers and ensure no predators have breached our defensive line. John perked up at this. Actual action instead of diplomatic tap dancing. Lead the way. Neela led him to a small structure near the village edge where various weapons and tools were stored. She selected a staff made of a material that resembled polished BM and handed Johan what looked like a curved knife with an iridescent blade. This should suit your fighting style, she said. Its balance for throwing or close combat. John tested the weapon's weight and balance, impressed by its craftsmanship. You've been analyzing my fighting style, your movements, posture, and the calluses on your hands tell me you're trained in both ranged and melee combat, with a preference for precision over brute force. Nil explained. Matter of factly, that's surprisingly accurate. John admitted. You're very observant. It's my job to notice detail, she replied, strapping a small pouch to her belt, especially when those details might pose a threat to my people. Am I still considered a threat? Johan asked, as they set out toward the forest perimeter. Nyla's glowing eyes met his. Everyone is a potential threat, until proven otherwise, Commander, even me. The patrol route took them through dense forest away from the village, and toward what Nyla explained was the boundary. Between Valen territory and the wilds of Elysium 9, as they walked, John noticed intricate markers carved into certain trees' symbol that pulsed with a faint energy psychic beacons, Nyla explained. When she caught him staring, they alert guardians to any unauthorized crossing. Impressive tech for people who returned to nature, John observed the returning. Wasn't about abandoning technology, Neela corrected him. It was about finding harmony between advancement and natural order. We don't reject progress, we simply ensure it serves life rather than dominates it, JN considered this philosophy as they continued their patrol. It was refreshingly different from the relentless forward march of Terran innovation, where can we often overshadowed, should we they had been. Walking for about an hour when Nyla suddenly froze, raising her hand for silence. John immediately dropped into a defensive stance, his military training kicking. And what is it, he whispered. Nyla pointed to a section of underbrush where the vegetation had been disturbed, tracks, fresh ones. She knelt to examine them more closely. Vexar, a pack of at least 5. I'm guessing that's not good. Vexar are predators that hunt in coordinated packs. They're drawn to psychic energy, particularly the kind emitted by Valen settlements. Nye's expression was grim. They shouldn't be this far into our territory. The boundary markers should have repelled them. JN scanned the surrounding forest. Every sense on high alert. Could the anomalies you mentioned be affecting your defenses? Neela looked troubled. It's possible the elders have reported fluctuations in the psychic field recently. A low growl emanated from the dense foliage to the right. John tightened his grip on the knife Neela had given him. How dangerous are these Vex? Snar exactly, he asked quietly. Extremely, Neela replied, reading her staff. And they've already surrounded us. The first Vexar burst from the underbrush in a blur of sleek dark fur and gleaming teeth. It resembled a cross between a panther and a wolf, with 6 legs and a ridge of quills along its spine that bristled with aggression. Johann barely had time to dodge as the creature lunged for his throat. Aim for the neck junction, Nyla shouted, her staff connecting solidly with a second Vexar that had emerged to her left. The impact produced a flash of energy that sent the creature tumbling backward. John rolled to his feet and flipped the knife in his hand, calculating trajectory in an instant before letting it fly. The blade struck true, embedding itself in the soft spot where the first Vexar neck met its shoulder. The creature let out a high-pitched shriek before collapsing. Not bad for a human, Neela called out, spinning her staff to create a defensive perimeter around herself as 3 more Vexar circled her. I'm full of surprises, John replied, drawing a second knife from his boot. Standard Terran military issue that he'd kept concealed until now. On your 6, Nyla ducked without hesitation as John's knife sailed over her head, catching a Vex Andar middle. The creature dropped, but not before its claws rack across Nyla's arm, drawing iridescent blue blood. John moved to her side, immediately positioning himself to guard her injured flank. How bad? Superficial, she grunted, though her face had peed slightly, but their claws secrete a mild neurotoxin. It will slow my reflexes. The remaining Vexar seemed to sense their advantage, circling closer with predatory patience. John assessed their options rapidly. 2 against 3 wouldn't normally be bad odds, but with Neela injured and his own ribs still healing, they needed a better strategy than direct confrontation. The trees, JN suggested, noticing how the Vexar stayed close to the ground. Can you climb with that arm? NLA nodded. The toxin hasn't reached my muscles yet, but they'll just wait us out. Not if we make ourselves less appetizing, John replied, his mind racing. He reached for his nanotech suit's control interface at his wrist. These things are drawn to psychic energy, right? What if we give them a different kind of energy to chase? Understanding dawned at Nyla's eyes. The power cell from your suit. Bingo, I can overload it to create an electromagnetic pulse. Now it won't kill them, but it might disorient them long enough for us to get back to the village. Without waiting for further discussion, they both scrambled up the nearest tree, finding secure positions among the higher branches below. The Vex snarled in frustration, one of them attempting to climb before sliding back down the smooth bark. John quickly reconfigured his suit's power distribution, channeling excess energy into the small backup cell located at the small of his back. The nanotech material around that area To glow and heat up, this is going to leave me without active defenses for a while, he warned Nyla, who was binding her. Wound with a strip of fabric from her belt, your selflessness is noted, Commander, she replied, though there was a hint of genuine appreciation in her voice. John, he corrected her, if we're going to be running for our lives together, you might as well use my first name. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. Very well, John. The power cell was now pulsing visibly through his suit. John carefully removed it, a cylinder about the size of his thumb, now glowing white. Hot with unstable energy. Ready? He asked. Nyla nodded, gripping a branch with her good arm to steady herself. John took aim and threw the power cell as far as he could in the opposite direction from the village. It sailed through the air in a bright arc before disappearing into the underbrush about 50 m away. Seconds later, a flash of blue-white light erupted, followed by a concussive wave that shook the trees. The effect on the Vexar was immediate. They wed and shrieked, their sensitive perception overwhelmed by the electromagnetic discharge. Without hesitation, John and Nyla descended from the tree and sprinted toward the village, leaving the disoriented predators behind. They ran in synchronized silence, Nyla leading the way through shortcuts and hidden paths that John would never have noticed on his own. Despite her injury, she moved with fluid grace, though John could tell the toxin was beginning to affect her coordination when they finally broke through the tree line into the outskirts. Availnar, Nyla stumbled. John caught her before she could fall, supporting her weight against his side. I can walk, she protested weakly. I know you can, John replied, not loosening his grip. But why should you when I'm right here? Their arrival caused immediate concern. Among the villagers, healer Tan was summoned, and Nyla was quickly taken to a healing chamber, while JN reported the Vexar incursion to a group of guardians, who immediately set out to reinforce the perimeter. Left alone momentarily, John examined his nanotech suit. Now, as expected, the loss of the power cell had rendered most of its advanced functions inoperable. The material still provided basic protection, but the medical systems, environmental controls, and adaptive features were offline. He was essentially wearing very expensive, very tight-fitting normal clothing. Your actions were unexpected. JN turned to find High Elder Morin approaching, those galaxy-filled eyes studying him with renewed interest. It seemed like the logical choice. At the time, John replied with a shrug that he immediately regretted as pain flared in his ribs. Most outsiders would prioritize their own safety and technology, Morin observed, yet you sacrificed protective capabilities for Guardian, and she would have done the same for me, John said simply. Morin's expression was unreadable perhaps, but her duty would have compelled such action. What compelled yours, Commander? Johan considered the question seriously. Where I come from, we have a saying, no one gets left behind. It's not just military protocol. It's about recognizing the value of every life, regardless of species or origin. A noble sentiment, Miranda acknowledged, though one not always reflected in humanity's historical actions. Were a work in progress, and John admitted, but the core principle is sound. Morin seems satisfied with this answer. Guardian Nyla will recover fully by morning. The toxin is familiar to our healers. He paused, then added, she has requested your presence once the treatment is complete. John tried to hide his relief and failed, judging by the knowing look in Morin's eyes. I'll be there, he promised. In the meantime, Sariri. Morin continued, I believe we owe you the communication we promised. Follow me to the array. The communications array turned out to be an organic-looking structure near the crown of the great tree, where crystalline formations grew in precise geometric patterns that somehow functioned as both receivers and transmitters. This will allow a narrow beam transmission to your fleet. Moore explained, it cannot be traced back to our location. John composed a brief message to Terran Command explaining that he had survived the crash and was being treated well by the indigenous population, but omitting specific details about the violin or the anomalies. As agreed, he requested no search parties be sent, assuring his superiors that diplomatic relations were being established and he would provide updates when possible. After sending the message, AI John turned to Morin. Thank you for honoring your word. The Valen value truth and integrity above all else, Commander. It is why the tree's pollen Reveals one's nature. Morin gestured toward the village below. Now, I believe. Healer Torin will have completed Guardian Nyla's treatment. You may find her at the healing chambers near the eastern roots. The healing chamber was a serene space, filled with soft light and the gentle sound of flowing water. Nil lay on a bed of moss, her injured arm covered in a translucent gel that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. Her eyes were closed, but they opened as John approached. You look better, he said, taking a seat on a small stool beside her. And you look like you're wearing a very tight normal shirt, she replied, eyeing his depowered nanotech suit. Johan laughed. Yeah, well, some sacrifices are worth making. Nyla's expression grew serious. The elders told me what you did. It was unexpected, so I've been told. John replied with a wry smile. Is unexpected the highest compliment a human can receive from the vein? Perhaps. Nyla said, a hint of that now familiar almost playing at her lips. Or perhaps it simply means we must reconsider our expectations. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Nyla spoke again. The Vexar should not have been able to penetrate our boundaries. Something is interfering with the psychic field that protects Vailnar. The anomalies that affected my ship, John suggested. Possibly the elders are concerned. Nyla attempted to sit up, wincing slightly. John gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Easy, Torin said. You need rest. Torin worries too much, she grumbled, though she did settle back down. The toxin is already neutralized. Humor me, John said. I'd rather not have to save your life again tomorrow. Nyla's glowing eyes narrowed. I call saving your life as well human then. We're even, John replied with a grin. For now, as night fell over Vailnar, John remained by Nyla's side, their conversation flowing easily from tactical assessments of the Vexar encounter to more personal exchanges about their respective worlds. John found himself sharing stories of his childhood on Earth's lunar colony and his years in the Tan Fleet, while Nyla spoke of violent traditions and her own journey to becoming a guardian. It was during one of these exchanges that NLA suddenly fixed him with an intense gaze and asked, do your people practice bonding rituals? John, the question caught him off guard. Bonding, you mean like marriage? Similar, perhaps, though more fundamental. NLA explained. The vein believed that true understanding between individuals can only come through the sharing of consciousness, a temporary merging of minds and spirits. John's eyebrows rose. That sounds intimate. It is. Nyla acknowledged. It is also sacred, not undertaken lightly or with just anyone. There was something in her tone that made John's pulse quicken. Why are you telling me this? Nyla's luminous eyes seemed to see right through him. Because tomorrow the elders will begin discussing your long-term fate among us. And because I believe there may be a connection between your presence here and the anomalies affecting our world. What kind of connection? I'm not certain, she admitted, but during our battle with the Vexar, when we fought side by side, I felt a resonance, as if your energy and mine were harmonizing in a way I've never experienced before. John remembered the fluid coordination they'd achieved during the fight, how they'd seemed to anticipate each other's movements without communication. So what are you suggesting? He asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Nyla sat up fully now, her face inches from his. Let us become one human male, she said with solemn intensity. I want to merge completely with you. John stared at Nyla, processing her words. The intensity in her glowing eyes told him this was no casual proposition. I'm not sure I understand what you are asking, he said carefully. This merging, what exactly does it entail? Nyla's expression softened slightly. It is not physical union, though there is a physical component. The ritual allows two beings to temporarily share consciousness, memories, emotions, core truths. It is how the veil and truly know one another. John ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit from childhood. And you want to do this with me, an alien you met 2 days ago, when I crashed into your sacred site, precisely because you are different, Nyla explained, leaning forward. The resonance I felt when we fought together, it shouldn't have happened. Valen can synchronize with other Valen through our shared psychic field, but never without outsiders. She touched her arm where the Vexer had wounded her, yet with you it happened naturally, without effort. And you think this has something to do with the anomalies? I believe it might. The timing of your arrival, the failure of our perimeter defenses, the gravitational disturbances, they cannot be coincidental. Nyla's gaze was unwavering. The merging would allow us to explore this connection directly without speculation. JN considered the implications. His Terran military training screamed caution. Allowing an alien species access to his mind could compromise Earth security protocols, yet something deeper more. Instinctual pulled him toward acceptance. Would I have access to your mind? As well, he asked. The merging is reciprocal. Nyla confirmed. You would know me, as I know you. It is a sacred trust. Took a deep breath. I need to think about this. NLA nodded, respecting his hesitation. Of course, the decision must be freely made by both participants. She settled back onto her healing bed. Rest now. We can speak more in the morning, but sleep eluded John. That night, as he lay on his own bed in the guest dwelling, is staring at the bioluminescent ceiling, his thoughts kept returning to Nyla, her fierce grace in battle, her sharp intellect. The way her eyes seemed to see right through his carefully constructed military persona to the man beneath. And then there were the anomalies. If there was even a chance that this merging could help understand what was happening to this region of space, didn't he have a duty to explore it, not just for Earth's sake, but for the Valon who had shown him such unexpected hospitality? By dawn, his mind was made up. He found Nyla at the edge of the village, performing what appeared to be a series of flowing movements that reminded him of Terran Tai. Her wounded arm showed no sign of yesterday's injury. Veen healing capabilities were remarkable. Your healers do good work, he commented, as he approached. Nyla completed her movement sequence before turning to face him. The body knows how to heal itself. Our healer simply reminded of this truth. She studied his face. You've made a decision. It wasn't a question, but John nodded. Anyway, I'll participate in the merging ritual, if there's even a chance it could. To help us understand what's happening with these anomalies, it's worth the risk. Something like relief flickered across Nyla's features. Thank you, John. The ritual requires preparation. Meet me at the heart of Valon at midday. The crash site, John asked, surprised. The very place it is where our paths first crossed. Symbolically significant for the merging. She hesitated, then added, the elders have been informed of my proposal. They have concerns, but will not interfere. Comforting, John muttered. Nyla's lips curved in that now familiar, almost smile. Prepare yourself, Commander. Opening one's mind completely is challenging even for the violin who trained for it from childhood. No pressure, John replied with a wry grin, though his stomach tightened at the thought. The morning passed in a blur of anticipation and apprehension. John spent part of it helping the village guardians reinforce the perimeter defenses, applying his military expertise to suggest modifications that might compensate for the weakening psychic field. The work kept his hands busy, but his mind continued to race with questions about what the merging would reveal, both about Nyla and about himself. As midday approached, healer Terran found him and presented a small vial of iridescent liquid. Drink this before the ritual, the old healer instructed. It will help your mind remain stable during the merging. Without it, the experience could overwhelm your human neural pathways. John accepted the vial with a nod of thanks. Any other advice for a firstimer? Torin's weathered face remained impassive. Do not resist what you see or feel. Resistance creates barriers, and barriers can damage both participants. He fixed John with a penetrating stare. And remember, Commander, what is shared cannot be unshared. Choose carefully what you bring to the surface of your consciousness. With those cryptic words, Torin departed, leaving John to make his way to the heart of Veen alone. The sacred site was a clearing about half a kilometer from the village, centered around a massive crystalline formation that rose from the forest floor like a frozen fountain. John's crashed pod had created a gouge in the earth nearby, though the Valon had already begun the process of healing the damaged ground. With some kind of bioluminescent moss, Nyla waited beside the cry, dressed in ceremonial attire that differed from her usual guardian garb. She wore a simple shift of pale material that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light, and her white hair had been unbraided to flow freely down her back. Around her neck hung a pendant that contained what appeared to be a fragment of the larger crystal. You came, she said simply, though John detected a note of relief in her voice. I said I would. He held up the vial Torin had given him. I was told to drink this first. Nyla nodded. It will help your mind withstand the intensity of the connection. I have taken a similar Preparation. John uncorked the vial and swallowed the contents in one gulp. It tasted surprisingly pleasant, like honey. Tea with a hint of something wild and unfamiliar. Now what he asked, feeling a subtle warmth spreading through his body. Nyla approached until she stood directly before him, close enough that he could see the subtle patterns in her blue skin that he hadn't noticed before. Intricate swirls that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Now we prepare our minds, she said softly. Think of who you are, John Reynolds, not your rank or your mission or your past achievements, your essence, the core truth of your being. John closed his eyes, focusing inward as instructed. He thought of his childhood on Luna Colony, the wonder he'd felt seeing Earth rise over the lunar horizon. He remembered his first deep space mission, the moment he'd realized just how vast and full of possibility the universe truly was. He recalled acts of courage and moments of doubt, times of joy and periods of grief. All the experiences that had shaped him into the man he was today. When he opened his eyes, he found Neela watching him with an expression of gentle curiosity. Are you ready? She asked. John nodded, his throat suddenly dry. Neela took his hands in hers, her blue fingers intertwining with his. The crystal will amplify and focus our energies, she explained. When the connection forms, don't fight it. Let it flow naturally, like water fighting its path. She guided him to sit cross-legged before the crystal. Their knees touching, hands still joined. The massive formation seemed to pulse with inner light as they settled into position. Close your eyes, Nyla instructed. Focus on your breath first, then on the point where our hands connect. John did as she asked, concentrating on the sensation of her skin against his cooler than a human temperature, but not unpleasantly, so he could feel her pulse through her fingertips, a rhythm slightly faster than his own. Neela began to hum softly, a melody that seemed to resonate with the crystal itself. The sound vibrated through John's body, aligning with his heartbeat until they pulsed in unison, and then it happened. The boundaries of John's consciousness began to blur, expanding outward like ripples in a pond. He felt presence not just physically, but mentally, a distinct energy that approached his own with cautious respect. I'm here, her thoughts whispered, though no words were actually spoken. I feel you, JN responded in kind, surprised at how natural the mental communication felt. The connection deepened, and suddenly John was experiencing flashes of Neela's memories, her childhood in Vailnar, training to become a guardian, the first time she defended the village against a Vexar attack. He felt her in her role, her deep connection to her people, and beneath it all, a profound curiosity about the universe beyond Elysium 9 that she rarely acknowledged, even to herself. In return, he knew she was seeing his own memories, his years at the Terran Academy missions across the galaxy, moments of triumph and failure that had shaped his career. He felt momentarily vulnerable, then remembered Tan's warning about resistance and allowed the sharing to continue. As the merging deepened, their separate consciousness began to harmonize, creating a shared perspective that was neither fully John nor fully Nyla, but something new and unified through this merged awareness. JN suddenly understood the nature of the violent psychic field with perfect clarity. It wasn't just a defense mechanism or a communication network, but a fundamental way of experiencing reality, of being connected to all living things. And there, at the edges of this field, he sensed the anomalies, distortions in the fabric of space-time that were growing stronger, more frequent, but they weren't random. They had a pattern of purpose. They're reaching for something. The merged consciousness realized, searching images flashed through their shared mind, ancient violent ships exploring the stars, encountering other species, including humans, a catastrophic event involving unstable energy fields, the decision to return to List 9 to limit their interaction with the greater galaxy, and then a revelation that stunned them both. The anomalies were echoes of that ancient event, ripples in space-time that had been propagating outward for centuries, only now returning to their point of origin, strengthened and distorted by their journey. It's a feedback loop. John's consciousness contributed the original event, created a temporal distortion that's been amplified over time, and now it turns threatening to recreate the very catastrophe that Biro at Enlaz's consciousness added. But there was something else, something unexpected. The merged awareness sense that John's presence, specifically the unique configuration of his human consciousness, was having a stabilizing effect on the anomalies where valent psychic energy and human neural patterns overlapped. The distortions weakened. This is why we resonated during the fight. Neela realized your mind naturally counterbalances the distortion pattern, and why my ship was pulled off course. John understood the anomaly was drawn to me, or rather to what I represent a solution. The revelation was overwhelming, but before they could fully process its implications, the merged consciousness became aware of another presence. Something vast and ancient, observing their connection with interest. The great tree Nyla's consciousness whispered in all its aware of us. JN felt the tree's consciousness touch their merg mind, not with words, but with impressions of deep time of cycles. Completing and beginning anew, it showed them visions of Ven and humans working together, combining their unique energies to heal the temporal wound that threatened both their peoples, and then with gentle firmness the tree began to withdraw its presence, signaling that the merging had reached its natural conclusion. John felt himself being guided back to his individual Yule consciousness, the separation occurring gradually. Respectfully, as the connection faded, he caught one last impression from Nyla, a feeling of profound gratitude, tinged with something warmer, more personal. When he finally opened his eyes, the sun had moved significantly in the sky. Hours had passed, though the merging had seemed to last only moments. Neela sat across from him, her luminous eyes regarding him with new understanding. You saw it too, he asked, his voice horror from disuse. She nodded, releasing his hands slowly, though he noticed she seemed reluctant to break the physical connection entirely. The anomalies, they're echoes of an ancient event involving both our peoples, she confirmed, and somehow your human consciousness acts as a counterbalance to the distortion, not just mine. John corrected, the knowledge clear in his mind. Despite the fatting connection, any human would have a similar effect, though the degree might vary based on individual psychic potential. Nyla rose gracefully to her feet, offering him a hand up. We must inform the elders immediately. This changes everything. John accepted her help, feeling oddly lightheaded as he stood. The merging had left him physically drained, but mentally exhilarated, and there was something else, a lingering awareness of Nyla that hadn't been there before, a sense of her presence, even though the direct mental connection had ended. You feel it too, she said, not a question, but a statement of fact. The resonance remains. Is that normal? John asked as they began walking back toward the village. No, Nyla admitted, the merging typically leaves only memories, not an ongoing connection. This is unprecedented. John processed this information. Should we be concerned? Nyla considered the question seriously before answering. I don't believe so. It feels right somehow, as if this connection was meant to form. The council convened immediately upon their return, gathering in the great tree's council chamber to hear their report. John and Nyla stood side by side as they explained what they had discovered during the merging, the nature of the anomalies, the historical connection between humans and Veen, and, most importantly, the potential solution their combined energies represented. So, you propose what exactly? Elder Kira asked, her sharp features tense with concern. That we invite more humans to Elijah 9 after centuries of isolation. Not necessarily, John replied, but some form of cooperation between our peoples seems essential if we're going to address these anomalies before they cause more damage. High Elder Morin, who had remained silent throughout their explanation, finally spoke. The tree has confirmed your findings. It communicated with me directly after your merging, showing me visions of what may come if we fail to act. This revelation sent murmurs through the council. The tree rarely communicated directly with anyone other than the High Elder. Then you support this alliance? Another elder asked incredulously. I support survival, Morin replied simply, and the anomalies will continue to grow in strength and frequency. They have already weakened our defenses against predators and disrupted space travel in this sector. If left unchecked, they could eventually tear AM9 apart and potentially affect human worlds as well. John stepped forward. With your permission, High Elder, I propose establishing a joint research outpost here on Elysium 9, a small team of human scientists working alongside violent experts to develop a permanent solution to the anomalies, and you would. Lead this human contingent, Morin asked, those galaxy-filled eyes studying John intently. JN glanced at Nyla before answering if that would be acceptable to the Council. Yes, I believe my unique connection to Guardian Nyla could facilitate the work now. Expression remained composed, but through their lingering connection, John sensed her approval, and something more personal that made his heart beat faster. After hours of debate, the Council reached a decision. They would allow a limited human presence on Elysium 9 under strict guidelines, and with John as liaison, the Terran Alliance would be informed of the situation and invited to send a small scientific delegation to work with Vint experts on neutralizing the temporal anomalies. As the Council dispersed, Morin approached John and Nyla privately. The path you have opened is not without risk, he said quietly. There are those among both our peoples who will resist this change. Change is rarely comfortable, John acknowledged, but sometimes it's necessary indeed. Morin's gaze shifted between them. The connection you share it persists beyond the merging ritual. Nodded. It does, High Elder. We cannot explain it. A rare smile crossed Morin's ancient face. Perhaps some things need no explanation. The universe has its own wisdom. He placed a hand on each of their shoulders. Walk together in harmony. Children of different stars, the future may depend on it. Later that evening, John stood at the edge of the village, watching the twin moons of Elysium 9 rise above the forest canopy. He sensed Nyla's approach before he heard her footsteps, another manifestation of their lingering connection. Credit for your thoughts, she asked, coming to stand beside him. Just wondering what happens next, John admitted. I've spent my entire career following orders, completing missions. This is uncharted territory, literally and figuratively. Nyla agreed. Are you having second thoughts? John turned to face her, taking in the way the moonlight played across her blue skin and made her eyes glow even more intensely. Number, whatever this is this connection between us, between our peoples. It feels right, like something that was always meant to be. Nyla stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the coolness radiating from her skin. During the merging, I saw many things in your mind, John Reynolds, your courage, your integrity, your curiosity about the universe, but I also saw loneliness, a man who has never truly belonged anywhere. John couldn't deny it. His life had been one of duty and service, moving from mission to mission without putting down roots. And what about you? I saw your dedication to your people, but also your secret desire to explore beyond Elysium 9. Perhaps we each have what the other has been seeking, Nyla suggested softly. John reached out hesitantly, his fingers brushing against hers. The contact sent a pleasant tingle up his arm, their connection humming with recognition. So where does that leave us? He asked. Nyla intertwined her fingers with his, her expression serious but warm, at the beginning of something new. Something that is neither fully violin nor fully human, but a bridge between worlds. I like the sound of that, John said, drawing her closer. As they stood together beneath the alien moons, John felt a sense of peace he hadn't experienced in years. His crash landing on Elysium 9 had been an accident, or perhaps, as Nyla might say, it had been destiny. Either way, he was exactly where he needed to be. Let's become one human male, Nyla had said. What had begun as a ritual proposal had become something far more profound, emerging not just of minds, but of paths, purposes, and perhaps, in time, hearts. The anomalies that threatened their worlds would not be easily solved. The cultural barriers between humans and Vane would not fall overnight. But in this moment, watching the stars with Neil's hand in his, John knew with absolute certainty that together they would find a way forward. After all, that's what humans did best: face the impossible, and somehow, against all odds, prevail. Humanity, yeah,